Welcome to today's webcast. Before we begin, let's quickly go over how to get the most out of this session. Your main player area consists of 3 windows: video, slides, and a multi-function window underneath. Each of these windows can be moved, resized, maximized, or even closed. If you'd like to return to the default layout, simply click the Restore button on the left-hand side of your screen. The multi-function window is where you'll find some helpful tabs like Questions and Answers, an area to download any available materials, and speaker bios. KPMG has been approved by NASBA to deliver CPE-worthy training. Today's CPE will be tracking your participation through attendee checkpoints, which will look like this. In addition to attending the entire session, you must confirm your participation by clicking Confirm each time this message pops up. Your participation will be tracked, and failure to actively participate will result in denial of CPE credits. If you have any technical issues during the webcast, please submit a question through the Questions and Answers panel, and our producers will respond to you directly. Please submit all content questions through the Questions and Answers panel as well. Thank you, and enjoy the webcast.
Welcome everyone to the third session of our KPMG 2023 Global Life Science Conference. My name is Anna-Marie de Turt, and I'm a partner in our Healthcare and Life Sciences Strategy practice based here in London. We also have Guillaume Favé with us, who will introduce himself and walk us through a few logistics for this event.
Thank you, Anna-Marie. And hi, everyone. So my name is Guillaume. I'm also a partner in our Healthcare and Life Sciences Strategy practice based out of London too. For our guests who are joining us today to gain CPE credits, please do remain logged in for the duration of today's program and reference the instructions tab to your media player for more details about how to secure those credits. Please do not hesitate to use the Q&A panel on your screen to submit the questions you may have. And also, at any time, please do feel free to reach out to our technical staff.
It goes without saying, the last few years have highlighted the economic, gender, and racial inequities that impact our society. And sadly, life sciences isn't immune from this. During the final session on day 1, our guest speakers will take you on a journey to address 4 key topics: women in technology, women's health innovation, responsible sourcing, and health equity.
Those are all very important topics indeed. And I am pleased to welcome Michelle Greene, Executive Vice President and Chief Information Officer at Cardinal Health, who will be joining Dr. Fiona Thomas, our Chief Medical Officer, and discuss women in technology.
Hi, and welcome to this session, Women in Technology, as part of our KPMG Global Life Sciences Virtual Summit. I'm Fiona Thomas, Chief Medical Officer at KPMG, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Michelle Greene. Michelle is Executive Vice President and Chief Information Officer at Cardinal Health, leading teams to harness technology and innovation to better serve customers and evolve healthcare delivery. In her role as CIO, Michelle manages the teams charged with delivering innovative, reliable, and secure technology capabilities that really enable Cardinal Health customers to thrive in a dynamic healthcare environment. And in addition to her day-to-day responsibilities, Michelle actively sponsors the company's STEM initiative. She co-sponsors BOLD, the Black and African American Employee Resource Group, and is an executive advisor for the Black and African American Equity Cabinet. She earned her bachelor's degree from Valdosta State University and a master's from Florida State with a focus on information sciences. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
And today we're going to be talking broadly about women in tech and more specifically about our role in innovation, particularly in the healthcare space. But first, Michelle, I'm sure our viewers would love to know a little bit more about you and the career journey that's taking you to this current role.
So first of all, thank you again for having me. I always tease and say that I don't know that I found technology, but technology found me. So as an opportunity, I didn't grow up your traditional like coder type of resource. I was the person that more understood technology, but also understood business. And that made a very nice mix. So I think I was a little ahead of my time when you think about people being business partners now. So I've had the opportunity to work for Sony Ericsson. And during that time, I lived in Raleigh, North Carolina, as well as I spent 4.5 years in Sweden. I had a chance to work for Johnson Controls, and I worked for their automotive division, their buildings division, as well as their corporate headquarters. I work for Masco Corporation, which if you don't know of Masco, you would know the brands. They own Behr Paint, Delta Faucet, Liberty Hardware, a lot of the home interior brands. And now, as you know, I'm with Cardinal Health. And I joined Cardinal maybe a little over 2 years ago. I've had the opportunity to serve as SVP and CIO for the pharma segment. And now I'm the CIO for Cardinal. So seems like there's a lot has happened in a little bit of time, but from a career perspective, really have leaned in on my leadership capabilities, understanding the technology, appreciating the ability to enable the solutions that are needed within the company, but also making sure I'm standing firm and being focused on our business and what the business needs to operate. So I tell my organization all the time, we are business people that happen to know technology.
That's absolutely fantastic and really resonates, actually. I think it is so important when you have that subject matter expertise, but also to be a little bit business savvy if you can, and really lean into the business and understand what the business is trying to achieve, can add so much value alongside that subject matter expertise. Well, you know, it's always intriguing to understand the motivation, the career path and trajectory of other female leaders. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Absolutely.
I mentioned in the introduction the importance of innovation. How important do you think it is to have women innovators behind technology that's being designed for women?
I think it's extremely important. If you think about it, we are breaking barriers. And that leads to an article write-up that we had a chance to post out on LinkedIn around breaking barriers in technology. We've really got some super smart women in this world within our companies. Having women in their perspective feeds right into all of the DE&I initiative and the ESG initiatives that companies have. Women do bring a different type of perspective along with other diverse populations. We bring a different type of perspective in technology. That hasn't traditionally been a place where women have been able to show up and to lead. So just having our voices heard at the table, I just think is extremely important because there are just so many ways that we think differently. We think about how many times that companies admit to we've done the same thing the same way for so long. And now you bring a woman into the situation, and many times you just get a different perspective and a different view. So I think it's extremely important. And I would speak directly, specifically around Black women in technology. That is even more rare. And I just think being able to do that more and more is quite important.
Fantastic. And I guess thinking about that innovation in technology, AI has been such a hot topic right now. You can hardly move without someone mentioning it or ChatGPT, and particularly, I think, in the health space, but also more broadly. I mean, what do you think? What do you see are some of the biggest opportunities and risks in this area in the next 5 years?
It's funny. I recently spoke on a panel at Vibe in Nashville about AI. I was in Boston last week with Kaios, which is the CIO Strategy Exchange. And literally for a day and a half, I would argue almost a day of it was everything ran back to AI. I would tell you that I'm excited and afraid all at the same time. If we don't put the proper governance in place and be very careful and be more balanced, understanding the biases that can still exist when you're using tools like this, we're just going to have to be smart. I've been telling my team, let's not let our excitement override our good sense when it comes to this. I think it was becoming a necessary, you can call it a necessary evil if you would, but it is necessary. We're already reaping benefits in so many spaces, and you think about all the good it can do. But even when you talk about like ChatGPT, you've got proprietary data and information that you do not want out there. And once someone does it, it's theirs. They've got the rights to it. So we have to be very, very careful about information we're sharing and how we're sharing it. but human beings are still going to be very important. We were talking about AI during this conference with the CIOs, and one of the biggest things we pointed out is some of the CIOs around the table are already developing organizations or small teams that their sole responsibility is AI, to understand what's happening, how quickly it's moving, where we have risk, where we have opportunity. So I do believe that's where we're moving. It's not that we will not do it. It's just that we're going to have to be very intentional about the type of governance we put around it to make sure we're protecting ourselves and our companies.
I think that's very pertinent. I think in the life sciences space, information security. So particularly in that area, would you have any advice for companies thinking about how they should be advising their teams to explore this new innovation, but still obviously protect the company's assets?
Is to find a way to be balanced, because you don't want to discourage people's creativity, their innovation, and we do have some very smart resources within our teams, and we need to lean into that. So if there are people that are super excited about this space, let's lean into their capabilities and their excitement and their energy and help them find ways that we can put the appropriate guardrails in place so that we keep ourselves protected.
Yeah, great. I think very sensible advice, not stifling the innovation, but still that caveat on safety and security. Well, one of the things that we've noticed at KPMG is quite a significant increase recently in resources for women in technology and in organisations also advancing women in tech. I wondered if you could share with us some insights into what Cardinal Health is doing to advance women and underrepresented talent, and also maybe which organisations you've chosen to partner with from a tech perspective.
So I would say, let's start with the first one, which maybe would have been last, is our STEM initiatives, because you mentioned that during the introduction. At Cardinal Health, we're collaborating within the community to encourage younger generations to explore science, technology, engineering, and math. If you think about it, most companies are struggling with the talent pools. If we don't start being more intentional about our youth and the younger talent, and then committing to how do we bring people along, then we'll never have the pipeline for that type of talent. So that's one space. Next, we have a program called Elevate that we've partnered with Chorn to design a differentiated leadership development program. It's a 6-month leadership program, and it's for ethnically diverse talent. I've had the opportunity to be an executive sponsor for Elevate, and I will tell you, I've spoken to some of the participants one-on-one, and this is one program that makes me extremely proud, because people are really seeing where they started in the program and how they grew and moved forward in the program. So understanding that Cardinal is really putting the focus and keying in on what do we need around our diverse talent, and not shying away from saying these programs are for ethnically diverse people. And let's focus, lean in, and make sure that we're doing the right thing to develop that talent. And lastly, we have WELD. We partner with the Women for Economic and Leadership Development. Again, a 6-month leadership course, very intensive, but preparing women for their first management assignment. I feel that that is so important, because too many times we either have women or diverse talent being overlooked because they're not ready, but we didn't do anything to prepare them. I'm a big proponent of you should almost be ready for the role before you get the role. And what happens then is we end up having to always go external or look past someone because they weren't ready. So with all of these programs, I feel we're setting ourselves up for success, to have a stronger, a more robust pipeline of talent that's ready to move forward.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. And I completely agree with you about being really ready to step up to that next role. I think when I'm speaking to other women and, perhaps they ask for mentoring or coaching, it's always about do as much as you can to prepare yourself, read, go to courses, speak to other women in leadership positions, really to get a handle on what it's going to take to step up to the next level. And we've got to treat women kind of fairly and differently in that respect, I think.
And
Fantastic.
Fiona, I will tell you one more thing. I've spoken to women, and for whatever reason, it feels that when a woman gets promoted or gets an opportunity, we're so focused in on just that opportunity. And I've been encouraging women more and more. Don't just think about this one. I want you to think about the next 2 opportunities or the next 3. And this is not saying you got in this one today and you think you're supposed to be promoted tomorrow. But if you don't understand what your next 2 and or 3 opportunities are, how do you get yourself prepared? I feel like if you don't at least think about it, you can't take the right path to be able to get there. So it's funny how I've got women that they're like, I was uncomfortable saying anything. I just got promoted to director and I was afraid to say anything about ever wanting to be a VP. I said, but if you're clear about what you want, that's the way people can help you, getting you the right experiences so you are more prepared. So I think the more that we encourage women to speak up, stand up, then we will start seeing more success in this field and in other fields.
Absolutely fantastic advice. Thank you so much, Michelle. We're actually out of time. So a huge thank you for sharing your experience and certainly more to come, particularly in the AI space, I think. Michelle Greene, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Dr. Sandy Milligan, Head of Research and Development at Organon, will join Dr. Fiona Thomas, our Chief Medical Officer, to share with us their insights on women's health.
I'm Fiona Thomas, Chief Medical Officer at KPMG, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by Sandy Milligan. Sandy is the Head of R&D at Organon and is responsible for all phases of preclinical and clinical development, as well as global regulatory affairs, medical affairs, and safety. Welcome, Sandy.
I am so thrilled to be here today, Fiona. Thank you for the invitation.
So today we're going to be talking about innovation in women's health and the importance of investing for the future whilst enabling choice and access through the utilisation of new technologies. But first, Sandy, I am sure that our viewers would love to know a little bit more about you and the career journey that's taking you to this current role.
Absolutely. So I have to say it has not been a linear career path and probably not a standard career path. So I received my medical education at George Washington University, but when I was going to school, I needed some financial assistance. So I took on a U.S. Army scholarship at the time. And that enabled me to make choices after graduation. And one of those choices, of course, was to serve out my military time as a general medical officer. So I served about 4 years, including my internship and my GMO, in the military, supporting both active duty soldiers, their families, and veterans. So it was an interesting time to be a soldier, and I was really proud of the time that I served there, supporting families and patients. During that time, I had the opportunity to go to Georgetown University Law School, which is definitely my first pivot. And that was exciting, a very different way of thinking and just a different body of knowledge to really bring under my belt. But what I really enjoyed was the combination of law and medicine. So when I graduated from law school, I started practicing law, and I went through several different specialties, including medical mal-defense, which is very popular in the United States. I did some venture capital financing, merger and acquisitions, and licensing. I entered into the pharmaceutical industry about 20 years ago, and I actually joined my first company, Amgen, through the law department. So it's been a very non-traditional career path, and that was really my second pivot. And the amazing thing about the pharmaceutical industry, of course, is that there are a lot of different opportunities spanning across the different functions and divisions. So I spent time in law, time in regulatory affairs. I supervised a safety organization, broader regulatory affairs and a global expanse, and then leading up to my current role, which is head of research and development for Organon.
Absolutely fascinating, I think, always to understand the career path of other women and the motivation and the different paths. You know, we tend to assume that careers have to be linear, but of course they're not. Life gets in the way and other things happen, and they can bounce around all over the place. So absolutely fascinating, and particularly your military experience and legal experience as well. I hope you don't mind me saying, but I think it's fair to say that you are widely recognised really as a trailblazer and advocate for women's health globally. Can you share with us really what women's health innovation means to you, and also what you think about where femtech fits in?
It's a great question. I think with women's health, we really needed to take a step back, and we did this as our organization was growing and after our spin out, in listening to women, what do they want for their health? And I think for a long time, women's voices have not been heard or recognized. There's been a lot of investment and significant improvements in the area of female contraception as well as female fertility, but we find that the other areas are quite lacking. So when we first started thinking about our new company and our mission and vision to treat women where they are, to improve their health every single day, we put our feet in the women's shoes as well as their caretaker, whether it's family practice or OBGYN, but those practitioners that are caring for women. And when you think about their day, it really is an interesting day. So in the morning, that physician may see a woman coming in to talk about menopause, to talk about a vaginitis, to talk about birth control. And midday, off they go to labor and delivery to deliver an infant. And there they're going to encounter very different, diverse practices. And when you think about that practice, I don't know another practice in medicine that actually can encompass a pharmaceutical perspective, a technology perspective, including devices, digital, and diagnostics. So we took a look at the practice, if you will, and then we looked at the patients. And we loosely divided up the indications and the experiences that women have in 4 different categories. First is contraception. I think what's interesting, and probably stimulated by the fact that I had a 16-year-old son at the time, was there are very few options for men to engage in family planning from their perspective. So I'm really interested in looking for innovation for male contraception, and there are some green shoots of innovation that are out there. The second area is fertility, and again, lots of progress in women's fertility, not so much in men's fertility. And then that leaves really 3 other categories. One is diseases that women encounter or conditions that women encounter because of their physiology, anatomy, or reproductive status. So those are things like menopause, endometriosis, really just diseases and indications that really fit with being a female gender at birth. And then the fourth category is the illnesses and the conditions and the challenges around maternal and peripartum medicine. And so that's where you find illnesses like postpartum hemorrhage or preterm labor or preeclampsia really affecting, of course, the woman, but of course, affecting the potential to affect the infant as well. So we took a look at those 4 cornerstones. And then there's also another cornerstone, which is more of a catch-all. And those are for diseases that disproportionately affect women. And so that can be everything from overactive bladder, autoimmune diseases. The areas those reach are much more competitive. And so as a company, we haven't delved into that area quite so much because we see that there's a lot of innovation ongoing in some of these other 4 areas. So we took those 4 areas and we layered on top of them our willingness to not just go into pharma, but to also go into the technology space, whether it's diagnostic or devices or digital. And we have a pretty broad scope and view. So it's pretty exciting to really look at end to end how we can support women with innovation.
I think that's absolutely fantastic. And the fact that you're really listening to what women want as well and taking that holistic view. So not just pinning it on pharmaceuticals or one particular area, but looking to all corners really to try and improve quality of life actually and outcomes for women. So I guess thinking about those areas, of innovation, but beyond that, also access and technology enablement. And can you share with us a little bit about how Organon supports these key pillars?
It's an excellent question. And I think, one of the foundational platforms that I feel strongly about is the availability of information, innovation, choice, and access. Innovation we just covered, right? Information is key to that. So we need to have, not just in the US or the EU, we need to have women who are educated about their healthcare and educated about their options. Choice is really key. It's interesting when you think about contraceptives. Women really do have a lot of choices. You have short acting, long acting, a rod, a patch, a pill, a ring. You turn to an area like preeclampsia where there's no choice and no access. Very, very limited options for treatment. So it's surprising that you haven't heard more from women's voices around some of these areas. And I think that with technology enablement and the idea that women can access medical care in a more fluid manner, particularly around telemedicine and teledocs, I think there's an opportunity to engage quicker and faster to solve problems, whether it's day-to-day problems around menopausal symptom management, whether it's contraception, or even postpartum care.
Now, we know that gender disparities have been very prevalent in R&D, and even though legislation has been brought forward in the last 30 years or so to try and improve the situation, there are still disparities that exist. What do you think could be some of the best R&D approaches to ensure that new innovations can be delivered to women as quickly as possible?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question because I think it's going to take an ecosystem to really pull through some of these early shoots of innovation through to development and to access through the markets. I think that there needs to be broader collaboration between industry and the regulatory agencies to really lay down pathways that innovators can rely on when they're making investments. Currently in the US, there is only regulatory guidance in a small select number of diseases and conditions that women experience, and therefore it is unclear how pharmaceutical companies and other technology development companies would actually get their innovative creations and solutions through to patients. So we know that this is an urgent question. Every single day in 2020, approximately 800 women died from preventable gaps and treatments in pregnancy and childbirth globally. And that's nearly a woman every 2 minutes. And in 2022, of the 37 total prescription drugs approved by the FDA, only 2 were for female-specific health-related conditions. And we know that 1 in 10 premenopausal women have endometriosis, and yet less than half are diagnosed and treated. And currently, those treatments are not necessarily optimized to support women across their reproductive endeavors, if you will. So I think that there is a lot of room for further investigation, but that collaboration between innovators with regulators, and then of course the pull through, because it doesn't matter if you have an approved drug, if you don't get payers to pay for it and you don't get access to that innovation.
Some really great insights there, in particular on really listening to the needs of women and a need for the whole industry really to take on board more innovative solutions to engage women in research. Well, we're actually out of time. Sandy, a huge thank you for sharing your experience with us today.
Thank you very much for including me in this conversation.
We are now delighted to have Kevin Nelson, Senior Vice President and Chief Procurement Officer, who will be joining Blythe Chorn to discuss responsible and sustainable sourcing and how it provides value to customers as well as shareholders.
My name is Blythe Chorn, and I'm a Managing Director at KPMG US, focused on responsible sourcing and supply chain ESG. I'm joined by Kevin Nelson with Becton Dickinson. Kevin is a global sourcing and procurement executive focused on delivering shareholder value through strategic sourcing, process reengineering, and transformation. Thanks so much for being here today, Kevin.
Thanks for having me, Blythe. Good to see you again.
You too. Before we jump into our questions, I'd love to ask you to start us off by just telling us a little bit more about your work and how your career evolved to working on responsible sourcing today.
Sure. Happy to. So my career now spans close to 30 years, believe it or not. And it's amazing how it's evolved over that time. It's always been really in procurement and supply chain for the most part, and began in the high-tech industry, worked there for a number of years before I moved into biotech in the Boston area. Then moved down, I guess it was 13 years ago, to CR Bard, another medical device company, who was acquired by Becton Dickinson here 5 years ago. So the roles have really been interesting. Again, all was in really procurement and everything. but the evolution has been really increasing in terms of the advancement. So much more data-based and analytical and so forth, really to help us, create supply chains that are more agile and resilient. That really kind of starts with, about 4 years ago, we started the whole journey of responsible sourcing. Then I can share some details here later on.
Which is, what does responsible and sustainable sourcing mean to Becton Dickinson?
So yeah, our journey really has gone from focusing on spend, which was, kind of a cost-focused type of metric in terms of trying to drive cost out to help patients and stakeholders with costs of healthcare. We've really evolved that over the years in terms of something much bigger and broader. And we stood up our responsible sourcing function here, again, about 4 years ago, to focus on total value. And some of the different pillars we have in there, I believe we have 6 pillars in responsible sourcing, focused on really human rights due diligence, scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions, sustainable products and services, transparency of the supply chain, supplier diversity, and supply-based resiliency. And each of these really comes with the understanding that we can no longer look at cost only. We need to look at how we can build supply chains that are more resilient and agile based on the changes that have happened as a result of COVID and just more disruptions in the supply chain around the world.
How do you think that approach provides additional value to your customers and shareholders?
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time in the recent probably year and a half meeting with customers. So at this point, I've met with well over 100 healthcare customers really in the U.S. And what we heard loud and clear is that, again, being a transactional supplier is no longer sufficient. The desire and the mandate is that we have to be adding more value. And part of that value is ensuring that we too have a responsible supply chain where these customers can buy product that they know is going to be high quality at a competitive price, but equally as important, it's going to be coming from a supply base that is agile and transparent, where they know that these suppliers around the world are, again, treating their employees ethically, that we're buying from regions that are responsible, and also materials that are responsible too.
You and I were talking about some of my experiences in this space as well, and that really resonates with what we've seen across the industry, which can be this linkage between focusing on responsible sourcing and via that process, really building stronger and more strategic relationships with suppliers, and ultimately seeing an impact on quality as a result of that, and really more consistent quality, because you think about some of the things about energy resiliency and being able to maintain operations and have more security in that cold chain, or stronger worker rights protection and what that means in terms of the labor force and therefore the impact on quality. And a lot of times I hear our clients say it does all come back to the same business drivers, but it's just a different way of thinking about how to get there in terms of quality and cost and on-time delivery. So that's excellent. Can you tell us a little bit more about BD's responsible sourcing program and how it's evolved over time?
Sure. If I think back to before COVID, probably prior to FY19, it was really kind of a spend-based compliance program. If you think about supplier diversity and human rights, we're really looking at what's the amount of spend that was being covered. And that's really kind of a reactive approach to managing a program. There wasn't really a whole lot of, proactive initiatives out there. What we've evolved into is really an economic impact when you think about the categories of human rights due diligence, supplier diversity. It's now an economic impact in terms of how are we really helping different areas and their economy by hiring diverse and small businesses in that region that truly are making an impact to their local community as well. So that's been really exciting. So moving to that piece has been good. We're now driving into this real true transparency. The transparency is really mapping our supply chain from end to end, all the way back to the tier N level. And that was a key kind of deliverable that came from the pandemic. We found that over 80% of our disruptions were happening not with our tier 1 supplier, but with the tier N. And the work that we started in FY 18 and 19 really was around mapping that tier N. So just by luck, honestly, when we were getting into the pandemic, we had significant visibility in terms of where these suppliers were located around the world and which ones might have weaknesses based on the pandemic and so forth. And as a result, we're able to really mitigate a lot of that proactively.
That's fantastic. Yeah, the ability to trace all the way back to raw material supply is a challenge we see across industries. But to your point, that's often where the business vulnerabilities lie, and also the biggest ESG impacts. And so the ability to really drive change, both again for business continuity, using ESG as a tool to get there, it's really exciting and really does help drive home the value of these responsible sourcing efforts. Most companies start with first identifying what the expectations are of the supply chain and laying out some kind of code of conduct. In your case, I believe we call it the global expectations for suppliers. Can you tell us a little bit about how you use that tool and how you ensure compliance with the expectations across your supply base?
Yeah, so we began, as I think a lot of folks do, in that we created the code of expectations for suppliers. Now, it's a document that really is as beneficial for us internally to understand what we want to do from a mentoring standpoint with our supply base to make sure that they understand what's required to work with BD. And in addition to that, we have different language baked into contracts and that. I think as we saw in COVID and the pandemic, though, that oftentimes was a little bit ignored. And so we had to be more active and proactive there. And that was more discussions proactively with the supply base around the world, tier 1 through tier N, in terms of what the expectations were. It was no longer sufficient to have language just in a contract and expect them to comply. So we've done a number of different things in terms of desktop audits that monitor human rights and different criteria. We also do then face-to-face audits in terms of how we can help identify and address things too. Then we have our SRM, Supplier Relationship Program, really focused on the segmentation of 3 different levels. And these different tiers have a different level of service that we're driving with these suppliers too. Tier 1 is where we're very active in working with them, establishing different criteria for what their greenhouse gas emissions need to be, how they can work with us to identify, sustainable products and so forth. And then as we go kind of down the chain to tier 2 and tier 3, it's a little bit lesser an amount, and it's more of a compliance-based focus there. But I think that's what has really evolved here in the past few years, is to really be more active with the suppliers. We can't expect that they know what we're looking for unless we truly engage and partner with them and try to solve these problems together.
And I'll throw you a little bit of a curveball at you here, Kevin, but can you tell us a little bit more about who's doing that work inside BD? Is that your team? Is that your ESG team? Some combination? How does that work actually get done?
That's been, I think, the biggest breakthrough for us. So if we look back a number of years ago, it was procurement focused for the most part in many of these different areas. And I think we were seeing limited returns. And in the recent couple of years here, we've been able to get really great traction, as we've always had with the sustainability team, but we've been able to partner not only with R&D to really focus on what products, materials, and suppliers are we engineering day one. They've been able to really look at this more transparently to make sure that we have materials that aren't of concern and suppliers that are resilient and so forth that we're engineering into their product line day one. In addition, then we have the business units that have truly taken an interest in terms of how can they make their products more resilient, knowing that at the end of this product is a patient and a customer that really truly does care. We see it increasing every day where some items are commodity based. And if your choice is between product A and product B, it's great to know that this is a product that has an ethical supply chain where they can rest assured that it's coming from, areas of the U.S. and or the world that are very fair and responsible. So that's really a differentiator for us now. And that's really kind of baking into all levels of the company, as well as our leadership, who's taken a very active approach as well.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. We're doing a lot of that work at KPMG right now to really help clients understand how ESG problems that really come to surface and to light in the supply chain are the result of decisions that were made sometimes years ago in the product design lifecycle. So Kevin, in the interest of time, I'm going to jump us ahead to our last question, which is, what advice would you give to companies who are just starting on their responsible sourcing journey?
I think as we learn, through many starts and stops in the past several years, and a lot of folks listening to this, I'm sure, have tried to do this as well. And I think what we needed to do, or what I would do differently, is really create, that strong vision and articulate that really with the leadership in the company, and more importantly, get the input from the stakeholders and the customers. And through these meetings that I've been having with the customers, we were able to hear loud and clear, again, product delivery and product cost were two very important elements, but they wanted much, much more. Taking that information back and creating the vision really was the key to getting this initiative started, and then working cross-functionally in the company to make sure that it was with R&D and sustainability and the business units and others, quality, regulatory. We got that momentum through alignment and collaboration. It's not something that we were able to do our own, and I'm sure others won't be able to do on their own as well. So that's really, I think, the key to success here. And then the ongoing visibility and kind of championing some of the wins and successes is really exciting. We've been able to share a number of different wins with our board of directors who become very excited, very engaged. They want to learn more. They want to know how we're going to continue to, raise the bar and continue to be a leader in this whole area.
That's fantastic. That's great. Well, Kevin, I've learned a lot from our conversation today, and really appreciate the spirit of transparency that you've shared, some of the bumps along the road, as well as some of the really innovative work that you're doing and the wins that have resulted. And I'm sure those watching are deeply appreciative as well. So thank you for the time, and look forward to continuing the conversation.
It's my pleasure. Thanks again for the chance to share my story today.
The final topic for this session today will be with Rady Johnson, Chief Compliance Officer at Pfizer, and Melissa Taylor, our Audit Global Lead Partner, to share their insights on health equity.
My name is Melissa Taylor. I'm an audit partner at KPMG, based in New York City, currently serving as the Global Lead Partner on Pfizer. And I'm delighted to have with us here today, Rady Johnson, Pfizer's Chief Compliance, Quality, and Risk Officer.
Thanks a lot for having me here.
I'm certainly interested in your views as to why health equity is important, and what is Pfizer doing in this space to facilitate equity?
It's probably the most important question, I think, that so many of us can be having today, asking of ourselves today. The starting point for me is by the reality that we have to recognize that health inequity really exists. It's something that's frankly been there for a long time. Probably not something we focused on as much, by we, I mean all of us, as much as we probably should. And, for me personally, the pandemic experience that we all went through really highlighted and exacerbated that inequity that we've been dealing with in healthcare generally, healthcare systems, and I should throw in the efficiency. It's not as terribly efficient a system as it could be either, and the inequity is the root cause of it is really lots of different things depending upon where you are. But I think recognizing how significant it is, and then kind of coming out of the pandemic, we realized for us at Pfizer that we've got to do something about it somewhere. And, we've got 3 or 4 amazing initiatives we've just kind of launched in the last couple of years alone that are exciting to think about. Ranging from the breadth of what we do here at Pfizer, from the early discovery and clinical development of our products, all the way through the manufacturing, and then through the kind of commercialization and ensuring access and availability. We think about how to kind of enhance and address the equity gap at every one of those stages. One example on the clinical trial side, and so we've focused a great amount of time over the last couple of years, really trying to be a leader on ensuring kind of diversity in our clinical trials. We're very proud of actually the progress we've made. And in many cases, we think that we're leading the industry in some of the initiatives we started there. Flipping to the other end of the spectrum, when you just talk about mere access and availability, it's one thing to have incredible medicines and products that are available, that exist, but if they're not available, they might as well not exist, to be honest with you. So yeah, the example that's probably the biggest one that comes to mind for me, and one I'm most excited about, is the Accord for a Healthier World that we launched last year. And it's aimed at lower middle income countries around the world, 45 countries, where we are going to be making available and are making available at a not-for-profit basis all of the products that we make in our portfolio, those at least that we have kind of exclusive global rights to. And in making them available at a not-for-profit basis, you're aiming at, there's probably 1.2 billion patients who right now are under served from a healthcare perspective. And the pharmaceuticals and vaccines and the therapeutics that we make available, and we're trying to encourage other companies to join or launch similar initiatives, is one great way to kind of try to break that down. But it's just a small part, because having the availability of the medicines is probably one of 10 things or 20 things you might have to grapple with in any of these given nations to make sure that the products actually get to the patients who need them. So the big innovative thing about the Accord for a Healthier World is just the partnerships we're trying to strike with kind of the entirety of the healthcare ecosystem. We've made progress with 5 to 7 countries already, some important progress. We've already got products kind of reaching patients in a couple of these countries, but it's something we're committed to for the long haul. But we've got to do it to really address, again, the 10 to 20 different things that are the real root cause for why patients in so many of these parts of the world actually don't have the healthcare that they deserve.
Thank you for that, Rady. There's a lot to unpack there, and very important work and commitment on the part of Pfizer. Maybe we try to pick one of those pieces. And could you maybe share your thoughts with us on what is the relationship between that critical access on an equitable basis and integrity and quality? And how are you all focused on that?
I think when you maybe picking up a little bit on the kinds of things we're trying to do through the Accord or any number of other initiatives and ideas and partnerships and coalitions and advocacy and all the stuff that we're trying to do to kind of help people step back and really examine the root causes of this inequity in access. For us to kind of be seen as a credible participant in those endeavors and those discussions and those initiatives, we realize it starts with, well, why should we trust you? What's up your sleeve? There must be something in it for you. We want to kind of disarm. We want to make sure that people appreciate that, as we kind of try to come to the table ourselves and bring others to the table to brainstorm and really try to problem solve, that we are doing so with nothing up our sleeve, with no hidden agenda other than really what's best for the patient. The patient is always kind of the centerpiece of just everything we think of when we try to run our businesses and plan our future strategies. So I think you're just not going to get very far unless people really don't think that what an amazing partner you are. And we believe that because of the integrity that you come to us with. So that's kind of the starting point about why it's so important. What you do to actually achieve it and maintain it and sustain it and nurture it is kind of, there's a whole other series of answers there. Recently launched our updated our next 5-year strategic plan, our purpose blueprint, as we call it. And it's got 5 core principles to it. And number 1 is trust is everything. That's the first thing that we are leading with, and acting with integrity always in everything we do. Go to enormous lengths working across the company and at all levels of the company, pulling that through and making sure it's in fact real.
I wanted to get your thoughts, just briefly about how with your other hat on about the role of compliance and risk and how that has evolved from your perspective in the industry over the past several years?
I came as I was an FDA lawyer by background. And so that's kind of how Pfizer recruited me to join them. And in the beginning, outside of the notion of kind of quality in the context of FDA regulations, the GXPs, so to speak, there wasn't we didn't spend a lot of time talking about trust and integrity, and the word compliance was rarely ever mentioned. Not because it wasn't really important to people, but I think maybe it was just kind of assumed. Of course, we're going to comply. What's the big deal about that? You don't get a lot of credit and brownie points for complying. Isn't that like starting in that baseline? But I think when you operate in a highly regulated, highly complex, highly competitive, ever-changing industry, it's one thing to assume it, but it's another thing to actually do. Through how do you create the right systems and infrastructure and culture and all these things. So when you look at that, how it's evolved over the last 30 years, really, it went from being kind of a handful. The notion of compliance went from being a handful of controls that were probably largely focused in finance areas, if nothing else, onto kind of a massive remediation effort, if you will. I mean, Pfizer and so many other companies in our sector found themselves in a heap of trouble in terms of government investigations and settlements and the like. And so it was kind of an immediate, the fires were burning, put them out, create some compliance functions and kind of deal with that. So after a while, though, it seems like lately I've been getting all sorts of reports from all sorts of different people who've been doing surveys and things, examining questions like the one you've asked. And one I'm looking at here, they've identified compliance 4.0. Now we're up to compliance 4.0. It's evolved. It's evolved so significantly over the years. We're light years away from being reactive. We are incredibly proactive. We're very proud of what we have built and nurtured and fostered here at Pfizer over these last many years. We feel that, at least as this report defines 4.0, that we feel that we're squarely in that territory. I guess the last thing I would say is, so good kind of compliance and risk functions and ethics functions. That's where they spend the bulk of their time. Is kind of on that end of the things, never taking their eye off of the kind of the ground level of mere compliance, but really ensuring kind of proactive risk identification, risk planning, risk mitigation, and then good execution on those plans, making sure you actually do what it is you say you're going to do or have determined you need to do to effectively manage identified risks. Maybe the last 3 words, the way we kind of think about that here, the bundles of work we do is driving, fostering culture. I could go on forever about that. I think we all know how important that is. Driving accountability, making sure that accountability for doing it right and doing it at a certain quality isn't my job. It's everybody else's job who's got that accountability in the line functions they lead and the operations where they work. And then lastly, I focus on leveraging independence. The fact that we are an independent function kind of within Pfizer and enjoy great support from the board and great support from our CEO and the entire executive team enables a certain degree of standing and stature and ability to do things and that kind of bring back to the culture and accountability pieces. It kind of helps to make all those real when you kind of have the right mix and balance of kind of all 3 of those pillars.
What advice would you give, to your fellow peers or colleagues who are working at companies where they're establishing a risk management and compliance program?
But I would start with the question of trust and integrity, and I would reverse engineer from there. What's it all about? It's not just about avoiding government prosecution. That's a really big win if you can do that. But to be a successful, valued, respected business, the other words that we all use now are the words we've talked about a lot through this brief discussion. But starting with trust and integrity and reputation and quality, those are the words that I think are far more important than compliance. I would read a lot of these reports that have been coming around. I would steal all the great ideas. I would leapfrog right to compliance 3.0 at least, if not 4.0, and kind of skip right over 1.0 and 2.0. I mean, you'll kind of, that'll be buried in there if you do it right. Other things, and I hope, these are, we all talk this way now. But it is proactive. It's being, risk mitigation. It's looking for practical solutions to things too. I think what we recognize is the skill sets for a really good compliance and risk function have evolved, what you need in there. When I first joined, when I first assumed this role, which is about 8 or 9 years ago, one of the things, and so I used to talk to my division, which was pretty heavily lawyer weighted at the time, and I loved them all. I was like, we need to balance out our skill sets and the different types of people. I mean, when I first got the job was when we were just beginning to talk about data analytics and monitoring and doing all this other kind of stuff. So I think you got to build into all your risk and insurance functions this real complement of different skills with things like AI all around and all the data is doing. You just need different kind of skill sets. So, today we recruit regularly from the business lines in Pfizer. We recruit from obviously lots of accountants and lots of consultants. We still hire lots and lots of lawyers. We need them. They're a foundational piece of it. Think of the kind of composite skill set that you're bringing to the kind of different roles and the impact you want to have. Lastly, I would just say it's so important to be able to have credibility and impact. And, you've got to just have the ability to drive to consensus, drive to compromise, help people embrace the situation honestly and openly, talk about problem solving. And those problem solves have to be real, again, kind of almost business enabling outcomes. Yeah, I know and I know everybody at Pfizer is just so proud of what we do here, to be honest with you. I mean, for a lot of years, the pharma industry has been a whipping post, I guess, for a lot of people. And for Pfizer coming, what we did during the pandemic kind of completely changed that mindset. And our heads are held incredibly high. But during it, more than in all of my years here, people were paying attention to understanding how our industry works as they watched the day-to-day kind of progress of the vaccines that everybody was waiting for. They were asking questions and learning more about, well, how do you actually discover this stuff? And how do you actually develop this stuff? And how do you actually make this stuff? And so it's an honor to work for a company and in an industry that's what we do. But I guess looping back to our first question, that alone is not enough because we've got to do that really, really well and then take on the reality of this health equity gap that's kind of just out there for all of us to kind of wrestle with.
And I love the way that you brought us back with some of your recommendations and advice to, it does all come back to trust and integrity. And I just want to say, on behalf of my colleagues, it's been a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you so much for taking the time. And we very much appreciate your contributions as well as Pfizer's contributions.
Thank you, Melissa.
What a great way to end the third session of the summit and the final session of today. Whether you joined us for all the sessions today or just one session or two, from myself and KPMG, thank you very much for joining us.
We hope you have remained logged in throughout the session in order to secure your CPE credits. At any point, please do feel free to reach out to our technical staff. Also, a big thank you from me and from the team for joining us today, and we look forward to welcoming you again tomorrow for equally exciting sessions. Thank you.